going to call to order the June 19, 2019 Planning and Zoning meeting. First item on our agenda is roll call.
Commissioner Height. Commissioner Tedda.
Here.
Commissioner Poland.
Here.
Commissioner Shernick.
Here.
Commissioner Kohler. Commissioner Flagg. Commissioner Honoran.
All right, next is communications from Planning Manager Don Burchett.
Chairman Shernick, we have none.
Okay, thank you. Next is our public invited to be heard. This is for anybody who wants to speak about something that is not on tonight's agenda. We do have people who are signed up. We'll start with those people first. The way this works is that you come to the dais, you get a green light for 4 minutes, a yellow light for 1 minute, and I will kindly cut you off at the red light, which is the 5 minute. This will be one of 2 public invited to be heard sessions for this meeting. There will be one after we get through our agenda item, which is on tonight's agenda. So let's get started with the public invited to be heard. First person on our list is Kate Powell. When you come forward, please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, Kate Powell, 1426 Pratt Street in Longmont. And I'm here regarding the 15th and Ash apartment complex that's being proposed. I'm actually not sure if it's been proposed to you guys yet. You may have heard about it because we were here last week with council. So I guess I can ask anybody that's here about that if they want to stand up, because I know not everybody's going to speak. Sorry, I can do that. So they're also here in regards to that. My overall concerns are in regards to the significant zoning changes that have been impacting our neighborhoods since they've been changed. How frequently are developers able to request variances to go beyond what the intended land code use is, under the guise of saying they will throw in some affordable units into their mix? Our understanding, based on the Envision Longmont plan, was that the land codes were the rules, and it feels like developers with planning and zoning's approval are able to go around those rules and intended uses. For instance, with this project, they're proposing 88-unit high-density apartments. And to clarify, it has nothing to do with Ash Street. I don't know where Ash Street is. This is across from Faith Baptist Church on 833 15th Avenue. So just ignore Ash. The zoning for this lot was recently changed. The land use code went from medium density to residential mixed. Our understanding is that primary use is single-family detached homes on smaller lots, duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, smaller multifamily buildings. The secondary uses also aren't for high-density, large-scale buildings. When this Envision Longmont plan was being introduced and communicated to the community, our neighborhood was involved in those meetings and conversations. Our understanding is that the primary and secondary uses for that land code would be used, and it was never intended to be what they're proposing. We do not feel like this project aligns with what the plan and the zoning changes initially entailed for that land use code. Envision Longmont plan reports that protective measures may be needed to maintain stability over time, tracking where and how future growth should occur within areas of change. Should significant development pressure begin to emerge in a particular area of stability, a more detailed analysis of trend and existing conditions should be completed to determine whether additional planning or protective measures should be developed in collaboration with the community. So I'm here asking for that. We were considered an area of stability, and we are experiencing this huge area of change impacts. I don't feel like this project is sensitive or compatible with the scale and character of the surrounding home. This infill project would also treat 15th Avenue as a major traffic thoroughfare, which it isn't. There was also discussion during the developers meeting that the emergency exit driveway along 16th Avenue would cause for the removal of currently existing mobile homes on the north side of the vacant lot. This development is using the guise of affordable housing to get approval for higher density than intended, and then in turn plans to uproot truly low-income mobile home owners. I'm also concerned about the 300-foot notification that occurred for this project. In addition to this vacant lot, the church also owns a good portion of the surrounding land, so the vast majority of the neighbors directly impacted were not even notified. I live across the street. I did not receive notification. The townhome project further down the road was 1,000 feet. I got notification for that. So I'm just not understanding how a larger, bigger project went from 1,000 feet to 300 feet notification for surrounding property owners. So I just want to ask you what's important, what the true vision of the Envision Longmont plan is. Is it to benefit the developers and their long-term financial plans, or for the overall benefit of the community? Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Next is Kenny Powell.
Hello, Kenny Powell, 1426 Pratt Street, Longmont. Again, I'm here talking about 15th, the property owned by Faith Baptist Church. It's not just the property that is on the north side of 15th, but the property their church sits on was rezoned. You guys all know that? I think every one of you guys, as far as I know, was part of that rezoning. I do appreciate your efforts to try and take care of and provide affordable housing and whatnot, but this rezoning is allowing developers to go around the primary zoning regulation and giving them enough loopholes that they can pack a lot of people in. And if you look at the street, you start with businesses and you go to like duplexes and whatnot, and then you're into single-family large lot homes. Rezoning it is bad planning. You're packing a lot of homes in, a lot of apartments in one small spot. It's going to create a lot of traffic, which I'm sure the road you guys can figure out how to handle through whatever means necessary. I don't think the city is opposed to using it in a domain, although I might be. I would like to see you guys rezone it back to what it was. That doesn't mean we can't provide affordable duplexes, triplexes, something to that effect. But I think that you guys have the power to change it back and do what's best for the neighborhood, best for the community. I know that there's talks about doing certain tests, and I can't remember what it was called. Councilman Waters had proposed it. The sustainability evaluation system. Perhaps that would be a good thing to do on this particular lot, this rezoning, to try and get it more in line with the community directly involved in that area. Pardon me. Again, you guys voted on it. I know that you guys can do something for us, at least look into it, do what's appropriate for the neighborhood. The high-density housing that's proposed there right now, not that I don't know if you guys have seen anything, it does abut to large lot, single-family homes, and we're talking like half, three-quarter, and larger acreage lots. The one has cattle on it. It would be pretty silly to cram in that many units next to large lot, single-family homes. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Next is Susan Springer.
Good evening, Susan Springer, 1607 Bowen Street. I speak to protest this same proposed high-density development on 15th. It's described as sustainable housing with an affordable housing component. My concerns are many. Chief among them is increased traffic pressure on two streets that are already a problem. Living at the corner of 16th and Bowen, I can attest that even without this development, speeding traffic on 16th is an issue. Drivers use 16th Avenue between Francis and Gay to race. After I gave this very same comment at the council meeting last week, I came home and wondered if I'd been a bit dramatic. And at that moment, somebody sped right by my house down 16th using it as a drag race strip. And I thought, okay, thanks. On 15th Avenue at the intersection with Bowen, my car was hit 4 years ago by an eastbound driver who failed to stop at the stop sign. I am still dealing with the injuries I sustained in that accident, and my quality of life has diminished because of them. Since that time, at least once a week, I am obliged to brake suddenly or use my horn at that same intersection because a driver fails to yield at either the eastbound or westbound stop sign. Neighbors have complained to the city that the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit is too fast for 15th Avenue. One neighbor in the Yeager Farms subdivision has recorded video of drivers failing to stop at the stop sign on 15th and Grant. One video even shows a hit and run at this intersection. The proposed 88-unit development is priced to attract tenants, at least in the first generation of tenants, who will have at least one car per household, most likely two. A conservative estimate is that 170 more vehicles will travel 15th and 16th, and I ask you to hear me. These are already problem streets and problem intersections. They are poorly engineered and poorly patrolled. And even without this proposed development, these streets need lower speed limits and speed bumps. If this development proceeds and nothing substantive is done about these streets, then the city's liability increases the next time an accident occurs. I also take issue with the fact that only residents within 300 feet of this high-density project received notification of the proposal. The impact of such a project is far more widespread than those living within 300 feet. This proposed project is not in compliance with Section 1.3A of Envision Longmont, which states that infill development should maintain and enhance the character of established neighborhoods. And I ask you, why create a vision and a plan if you don't follow it? And again, I recognize this project has not yet come before you. That's a rhetorical question. So I ask you to hold public hearings so that the concerns of the neighborhoods can be fully addressed. I ask you to rezone this lot to prohibit high-density development. I ask you to address concerns about 15th and 16th Avenues. I support affordable housing, but 12% is way too low a bar to make a meaningful statement, and the city gives away too much in exchange for such a token. I also support sustainable housing, but only if the rent prices are inhibited so that they are sub-market in perpetuity. I am not against infill development and could support this project if its density were cut by 50% and the present medium density zoning was respected. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Springer. Bill Hayes.
Hello, my name's Bill Hayes. I live at 1324 15th Avenue. I am also here concerning the 15th Street development. I think Susan and Kate have said everything that probably needs to be said. I'm not sure if this is already zoned properly for this. It doesn't seem to be. When we went to the church meeting, the developer had a consultant who said that 15th was a collector street, which I don't understand as well. My main concern is that when you see this project and they propose 88 units with 153 parking places, if it goes through, we will have parking up and down 15th Street. We'll have probably a minimum of 200 to 250 trips up and down 15th every day. If you can't stop it because of size, then at least look at the parking. If they have 88 units and 153 parking places, they have no place for visitors. Everybody has visitors. Where are you going to put the cars? 15th Street is already busy. So unless the church wants to volunteer their parking lot on a 7-day basis, I'm completely against this on size alone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Margaret Halsey.
Hi, how's this? I'm Margaret Halsey. I'm at 1438 Broad Street. Good evening. I'm here to speak also about against the development on 15th and Pratt as planned. The number of units is too high for the space and the number of parking spaces too low. Three-story buildings are planned with each unit having a 9-foot ceiling. The height of each building will be at least 32 feet, probably more. The complex will tower over the neighborhood and give the skyline the look of jagged teeth. Because I was concerned about this project, I've been studying the LDC. In it, the phrase, however, Development that incorporates affordable units may be eligible for higher densities as specified in the LDC. So far, I haven't found the part in the LDC that specifies those eligibility requirements. It seems that this affordability exception is allowing development that will irrevocably change the character of the neighborhoods and provide little real affordable relief. If the rent of an affordable one-bedroom with 560 square feet is $900 per month, as is planned on the 15th Street project, is that livable or just affordable? It seems I'd like the board to change the eligibility requirements for higher density to include minimum square footage requirements, keeping rents at $1.25 per square foot of living area. The number of parking spaces for residents should be at least double the number of units. It's important to me because I've spent years living in apartment complexes, and the thing that makes the most arguments between neighbors is parking. I support affordable housing in theory, but fear the implementation here will change the wonderful character of Longmont that promotes diversity and supports community. Longmont is more livable than Boulder or Denver, and I think we can develop affordable housing that does not burden the surrounding neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Halsey. By the way, I apologize in advance if I mispronounce somebody's name. Callie King.
You got it right, thank you. Good evening, members of Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Callie King, and I live at 1434 Pratt Street. My family and I have lived here in our neighborhood for 10 years. I am here tonight to talk about the Envision Longmont plan and the recent zoning and land use changes that could have a negative impact on my neighborhood. Specifically, I recently attended a neighborhood meeting for a potential development project on 800 15th Avenue. This is the old Faith Baptist Church football field on 15th. The property is a 4-acre piece of land that the church has recently posted for sale. Envision Longmont changed the land use code from this lot from medium density residential to residential mixed neighborhood. Medium density residential allowed for up to 12 units per acre. The new zoning of residential mixed neighborhood allows up for 18 dwelling units per acre. However, a development that incorporates affordable housing units may be allowed up to 22 units per acre. That is nearly double the allowable density on this property than that was previously zoned for prior to Envision Longmont. This is a mistake and it does not fit our neighborhood. The proposed apartment project is proposing three-story apartment buildings, which will be 88 units on 4 acres. 3-story apartments and a maximum of 22 units per acre would be next door to large lot single-family homes and single-family neighborhoods. That is not good land use planning. Additionally, allowing 3-story apartment buildings does not meet the primary or secondary use of mixed neighborhood land use category according to Envision Longmont. I believe this type of proposed high-density development is taking advantage of the code and only maximizes development for private profit and gain. Good land use planning would require a transition zone between large lot single-family residential and any high-density development. It is my understanding that this commission recommended approval for Envision Longmont and the current land use code, and that both can be amended. I believe that the zoning changes were too aggressive for this specific property, which is shown as an area of change that allows for more dense development. Furthermore, my neighborhood is shown as an area of stability, and the proposed maximum allowable development density would negatively impact our neighborhood, which is not the spirit of Envision Longmont. I am requesting that you please direct staff to look into this property and the Envision Longmont plan and the land use code and make recommendations to limit the high-density development in this area. I would also request that this commission put a hold on any site planning applications for this property until staff has time to evaluate the area and bring back recommendations to limit the high-density development. Please take action tonight. Thank you for hearing me, and have a great night.
Thank you, Ms. King. Elizabeth Storm.
Good evening, Elizabeth Storm, 1115 15th Avenue. I live 500 feet from the proposed development across the street from Faith Baptist Church, and I ask you to do what every other person who has spoken tonight to do, which is to revisit the zoning and follow the spirit and the letter of Envision Longmont, which this intended proposal of 88 units on a 4-acre property that changes the nature of the stable neighborhood in which we all live, that includes single-family homes, mobile homes, and duplexes as well as triplexes. This 88-unit, 3-story apartment complex fails that vision completely. It also fails to take into the account the recent or potentially already approved proposal on the 15th Terry Street townhomes, where you're putting 15 or 16 townhomes right next door. I think Mayor Begley's office is also across the street from that parking lot as well. And it also fails to take into account the potential sale of the Colorado Stone property that is very near 17th Street, but creates a nice L shape with these 2 properties as well. So don't change the nature of our single family and mobile home and duplex and triplex neighborhood in such a dramatic way. So Commissioner Onren, Flagg, Kohler, Schernick, Poland, Teta, Height, please dedicate time and resources to hear the community and the people who live there, because we voted in city council and they appointed you, and we're asking you to take this under consideration and reduce the size of this potential development, and don't destabilize the neighborhood that we live in and pay taxes in.
Thank you, Ms. Storm. Kathy Hack.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kathy Hawk, and I live at 905 West 15th, right next to Faith Baptist Church, and across and down the street from the proposed lot. And I guess I'm kind of here to speak to the stability of the neighborhood. My husband and I moved in 13 years ago. We have a historic home that we've put a lot of work into. And throughout those 13 years, the neighborhood is a stable, single-family home neighborhood with there's duplexes, there's triplexes, there are mobile homes in the area. And it's a neighborhood where there's block parties, kids walk to and from school, bike riding up and down 15th Avenue. I myself have a private practice. I work with kids with special needs right there, and have maybe 1 or 2 at a time. So it is a neighborhood that is filled with family types of things. I do not believe that the 88 units could be sustainable in our area. Since we've moved in, we had been calling the city and complaining about traffic on 15th. It's not a thoroughfare. The only stretch that you have is from Main Street up until Gate, which is about 6 blocks. And so that's not a thoroughfare. We've complained. We have had my husband's truck, he'll tell you about it, was 2 trucks actually hit in front of our house as they were parked there. One of them totaled. I was hit by a car as I was turning into my driveway because there isn't traffic control, and then increasing the amount of traffic up and down Main Street or up and down 15th Avenue is not going to be sustainable to be able to house that many people. And so I would actually kind of reiterate what this kind lady before me said, is to listen to what everybody had said about our stable neighborhood that we have, and don't change the character that we have in our stable family type neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hawk. John Hawk.
Good evening. I'm John Hawk. I also live at 905 15th Avenue. New faces to me, but I served on this commission over 10 years ago, and there are many things about this development that I find deeply disturbing. First and foremost, as been mentioned, is the 300-foot buffer around it. We live very close to the entrance to that lot. We did not get any type of announcement on this change. We did not get any type of announcement on the change of the street to a major thoroughfare. As my wife just mentioned, this block, it's 6 blocks long. Thoroughfare for what? To go from Main to Gay? It's not built to handle that load of traffic. It's already an issue. We have recorded, it was just like a baseball meter, cars doing in excess of 80 miles an hour down that street. We have complained repeatedly about it. I have email change on our complaints about what's going on that street. And the answer we get is, it's part of the city plan, it's this, it's that. We can't infringe on the rights of commuters. The commuter's already breaking the law. They're doing 80 miles an hour down this street. As my wife has mentioned, I had a truck totaled in front of my house by somebody doing 80 miles an hour down that street. They hit it so hard, they bent the frame on a big truck, and they flipped their car. There was 200 rounds of AK ammunition scattered across the road. You know, real special people coming up and down that road. So instead of listening to the neighborhood and addressing the concerns of the neighborhood, from all indications, it looks like somebody is trying to find a way around what the city has designated for the development plan. There is no way you're going to fit 88 units on that lot and have them in compliance and part of the neighborhood. It can't handle the traffic. It can't handle the traffic that we have there now. Rather than addressing the issues we have, rather than restriping the road to try and slow it down, to put in speed bumps, to do something, instead, they go exactly the opposite of what we've been asking for. We've been asking this for over 10 years. We have been complaining about this for over 10 years. And again, the replies we get are not in character with what we believe Longmont is. You know, it's not Boulder. You're not pushing these types of developments down our throats. And again, like, you know, I pay attention to the mail I get. I've served on this board. I understand the process. And I have gotten nothing in regards to any change that we see. I got a flyer on the townhomes that are 1,000 feet down the road, but I've got nothing on the change of the designation for the road. I've got nothing on these 88 apartments. I've got nothing on changing the designation of our neighborhood from single family to mixed use. So there's a whole lot going on here that the neighborhood doesn't know about. And by rights, we're the neighbors. We need to know what's going on in this lot. We have a right in this process too. And everybody here, even those that hasn't even hit the Planning Commission yet, we're here because this deeply concerns us. This is not a small infill. This is a major, major project where they're going to remove affordable housing to build affordable housing. That is ludicrous. It's a designated area already. Yeah, if you're putting in 40 mixed income homes, sure, I'd be good with that. But 88 low income and $900 a month is not low income for a studio apartment. And that's, in my mind, that is not low income. So please, as everybody else has said, listen to what this neighborhood is telling you. Rezone that lot and avoid this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huck. Is there anybody else who would like to come forward and speak about something that's not on tonight's agenda? Now's your chance. We'll have one more public invited to be heard session after, well, it's toward the end of our agenda. Anybody? Okay, we'll close the public invited to be heard. We will move on with item 5, which is approval of our minutes from May 22, 2019. Do we have any discussion or comments about the minutes? Commissioner Teta.
I move to approve.
Motion to approve our minutes from May 22, 2019. Commissioner Poland.
I'll second that.
Seconded. Let's take a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, Commissioner Onaran and Commissioner Flake abstain. Okay, all right. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 approved and 2 abstentions. Okay. Next on the agenda, item 6, Pratt and Brown's Garden, replat B, previously known as Martin Street Multifamily, PZR 2019-8, with Senior Planner Karen Bryant.
Chairman Shernick, Planning Commission, Karen Bryant, Planning and Development Services. So, really quick, the application before the commission is a replat, and the commission is the decision-making body. As a reference, the preliminary and final plat for this project have been combined into a single application for review and approval. I do also want to let the Planning and Zoning Commission know that there is an associated site plan application for this property that is undergoing review by the city. The site plan application is a minor application, and so it's being reviewed and approved administratively, and so it will be approved by the Planning and Development Services Director. And that site plan is still under review. It has not been approved. So really quick, just project location. It is the yellow lot. It's approximately 2/3 of an acre. It's one lot north of Longs Peak and immediately adjacent to Martin Street. Kensington Park is east of it. And just for reference, it is right across the street from the area known as the historic East Side neighborhood. So the request itself is to replat the single lot to create a total of 8 lots, 1 for an existing home, 6 lots that will be for 2 triplex buildings, and then an outlot for parking, landscaping, and the necessary infrastructure. One thing I would just want to point out about the request is the density range that's allowed in this area per both Envision Longmont and the zoning code is 6 to 18 dwelling units per acre. The property is 2/3 of an acre, and the proposed 7 residential lots will create a density of approximately 11 dwelling units per acre. So it's about mid-range of what would be allowed. So there's additional information on this in the staff report, but compliance with Envision Longmont and review criteria. The land use designation in Envision Longmont is mixed neighborhood. The application is consistent with this designation, and in addition, it meets several goals and policies within Envision Longmont. It also meets the necessary review criteria in the land development code, including the review criteria for all applications, those for a preliminary plat, and those for a final plat, and those section numbers are listed. Also, I just want to point out to the commission that the city does, as you're aware, have a new inclusionary housing requirement, and the applicant is working with staff to ensure compliance. Public input on this project. So noticing was completed per the land development code requirements, and the certifications and notices were included as attachment 3 in your packet. I do want to point out that the notice of application sign did need to be replaced. And the concerns that staff heard from the public are typical for infill development projects or other projects that include additional residences. So the biggest 3 that we heard are listed above. The first one is the concerns about the additional density. I addressed that earlier. The other 2 concerns really have to deal more with the site plan, but I do just want to mention them. One is the questions about the size of the new buildings and compatibility. I will tell you that this application has changed from when it first was proposed to the city. They were doing 3-story townhomes. They've now changed it to keep an existing home, and the 2 triplexes are going to be 2-story. The next one is the concerns about additional parking and traffic that will result. A traffic study was not requested as part of the application because the project size is below the threshold, but a multimodal plan was included, and the entire project was reviewed by both transportation planning and traffic engineers. And all required parking for both and all the required parking is going to be provided on site. And then there's the additional street parking around as well. So staff is making a recommendation that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve the replat application, finding that it meets the review criteria. And that recommendation is reflected in PZR 2019-8A. And again, just to remind, I mentioned it earlier, it's a replat. You guys are the decision-making body. The applicant is present and does have a presentation for the commission, and staff suggests that maybe we hold off on questions until after they've presented.
Great, thank you, Karen. Let's go ahead with the applicant's presentation, please.
Good evening. My name is Steve Lane. I'm with Basis Architecture here in Longmont, representing the applicant. I've just got a relatively quick couple of images for you. This one in particular is just a site aerial, of course. It's a little hard to see, but the property is surrounded in blue, just one lot north of Long's Peak. You can see Kensington Park to the east. And what's interesting about this aerial is directly to the north, you can see a big long building, and then two lots, basically one lot south of Long's Peak. There's a whole bunch of multifamily in here. There's a lot of multifamily mixed into this whole area, which is probably why it got rezoned to MN the way it did. So again, as Karen pointed out, we're right in the middle of the allowed zoning, so we're not coming close to maximizing. We are providing all of the parking and so on. So I would say that this project is in fact consistent with Envision Longmont. Let's see. Next page. Yeah. So this is just a quick little site plan. Again, when I first actually got involved in the project, it was after the first initial meeting with the city, and the client had proposed a little bit bigger project, getting rid of the existing house. And when I took a look at it, we took a look at the historical survey. I actually serve on the Historic Preservation Commission here, so I had maybe an agenda as well to take a closer look at this house. It's not, you know, I mean, it's not a museum quality piece, but it does have some relevance, and even in terms of scale and the streetscape. And so I felt like it was really important to try to maintain that. As a result, the applicant has really sort of incurred a lot of extra pain and suffering dealing with some of the, we have got a floodplain line on the east that we're dealing with. We've got a number of different complications that have resulted in that, and they've been patiently sort of plugging through. We're kind of committed to preserving this piece of streetscape. And if we can get to that. So you can see, this is an image I think that was in your packet. You can see the existing house and the townhomes provided behind it. The original plan, again, had a third story, which is totally allowed. I mean, we could meet any height requirements, but we felt like this was a better plan. And in fact, we had our neighborhood meeting about a year ago now. And in that, we actually we showed the neighborhood both scenarios. We showed them a scenario where we had a 3-story plan. We could park under the building. We could have a little more green space on the south line. And then we showed them this plan and said, you know, an alternative is that we could surface park, bring the buildings down, save the house. And you know, it was just a no-brainer. Overwhelming feedback was, please save our streetscape and drop the height of these buildings. So I guess again, this is maybe more information, but at least to give you a context, there's been quite a bit of work done on this pretty little site to try to be as compatible as possible. So, go to the next one. Then, in terms of platting, this will give you a sense of the streetscape, right? So we've got this little house. There was one other house on the property to the south of this home, but it was from the 50s and 70s. It had no historic value, and its condition was appalling. So it's actually already been demolished legally with a permit and so on. So there was no value in keeping that. But you can see the streetscape is, it's dominated. It will be still dominated by this small house, and the buildings in the background are designed to recede and not become an overwhelming part of that streetscape. So why the plat, which is really why we're here. It's one lot now. If we're able to create a plat that divides the each individual unit up into its own property line. In other words, we don't have to create a condominium for the 7 units on one property. Each of the triplex buildings would be essentially built like a townhome, so with a rated party wall and a property line between them, and that creates an opportunity for these properties to be sold fee simple. And those of you who are familiar with financing know that that makes it a lot easier for someone to get financing, to be able to purchase a home. And while that has really nothing to do with the purchase price, it makes it much, much more attainable for somebody who needs a loan. As a side note, we have looked at the inclusionary zoning ordinance, and effectively the price points that these units would be looking at would put them in that tier A, which in effect complies with all the standards. It's in a price point that is considered affordable, so there's not any further requirement for fee in lieu or an affordable unit. So I think we've done a whole pile of things to make this a good example of an infill development that's appropriately scaled and fits the neighborhood and addresses the goals of Envision Longmont. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. So any clarifying questions before we do the public hearing on this? I actually have one. I'm not sure if it's going to be Karen or Mr. Lane. In Mr. Lane's letter, he mentioned something about requesting a waiver from a standard about having the parking on the south edge. But Karen, for you, is that part of our decision tonight, or is that part of the site plan that's undergoing review?
Chairman Shernick, that modification is administrative and it's part of the site plan.
Okay, all right. And also, Mr. Lane, in your presentation just now, you mentioned the long building to the north. You did not actually clarify, I don't believe, what the use of that building is on the other lot that's just next to your lot?
Sure, it's just, it is an apartment building.
Okay.
That's directly to the north of this site. There's, it basically faces north. The buildings, the openings that are on the side that faces this property are relatively small. I don't know whether they're bathrooms or what, but it's basically like a big giant brick wall is what it really kind of amounts to.
Okay.
It's a single story.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Height.
Yes, thanks. Mr. Lane, page 2, which is the next page of your presentation, which I think is your site plan. Thank you, Karen. On the south edge, it looks like possibly up to, 14 garages. Are those garages? Or are those
No, they're just parking
places?
spaces.
And are they going to be deeded? Are they part of the lots, or are they just going to be open on that outlot A?
They will be part of Outlot A, so there'll be a set of covenants that controls maintenance and so on. So basically, all the drive, parking, and any green space associated with the development would be in an outlot that's controlled and maintained by an association.
So the parking's going to be common element. It's not going to be deeded.
No, they're talking about whether or not they end up reserving or labeling
Limited
space
common
for
element, yeah.
units,
Okay.
but that's all
I was
Just
just
as far as this goes.
curious because it looked like possibly those were garages, but they're
Yeah,
not.
no, they're not garages.
Thank you.
Could one of you speak a little more about the floodplain and I guess what implications that has for that unit that's in it?
Sure. So we just have a process. It's lengthy, but it's not necessarily an issue. Essentially, there's there's that little creek that goes through Kensington Park, and we will end up having a little bit of fill on the eastern end of the building to effectively raise the floodplain. So it'll have to, once we have all of our approvals in place, then we actually have a floodplain development permit that's been reviewed and ready to go. That would allow regrading. It essentially involves raising the end of that eastern edge of the property up about 2 feet. That takes it out of the floodplain. Then we survey it, send it to FEMA. They revise their map, and then it's no longer in the floodplain. So it's all part of the city process. There's no crawl spaces or basements or anything associated with the project. So effectively, when it's all said and done, the floodplain will just be in a different place.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lane. I don't see any other commissioners wanting to ask questions at this time, so I'm going to open the public hearing part of this. This is a public hearing item, and nobody has signed up yet, but if anybody in the audience would like to come forward and speak about this, please come down. Give us your name and address for the record. Once you get to the dais, you'll get 5 minutes to speak.
Hello, my name is Yolanda Sandoval, 737 Martin Street. I'm here with my mother, who's at 729 Martin Street. So we're right across from this proposed building or buildings. My reason for coming is that we've lived on this Martin Street for nearly 60 years, and we have concerns as well as other people have stated about the other proposed building. And that is mainly traffic. It is a big problem on our street. Ironically, recently, and I've reported this to the police about the traffic. It isn't very well regulated. Recently, I watched a police officer speeding down the street after another vehicle, and I thought that person was going to get a ticket. They reached 9th Avenue, and they both went separate ways. So I actually called the police about that. Spoke to a very nice gentleman who advised me that the officer had been spoken to and that he regretted speeding. He didn't really have a valid reason to be doing so, but it was just the irony that we have speeders as a problem, and the cops are also a problem on occasion. I've asked for increased patrol there. We typically sit outside on our porches, rarely see any cops, rarely see anybody pulled over, never see anybody pulled over. I've actually seen just yesterday a cop driving by, and he was following another vehicle, or there were vehicles going in both directions, and they were both speeding, and the cop didn't seem to be aware of them. So the concern with this project is that my initial understanding of it was that it was going to be a triplex. Now I'm understanding that there's been some changes to it and some requests that it's now 2 triplexes, 7 units. I would guess at a minimum 14 vehicles if you allow for 2 vehicles each. I couldn't really tell from the picture, the drawing, how many parking spaces are allowed there. There's very little street parking, as the gentleman referred to earlier. There's very little street parking. The other main concern that we have about this area is that on the block in which my mom and I live on, there are already 4 other dwellings, apartments. So it's talk about a high density for those type of units. And then as the gentleman also pointed out and you asked about, to the north of this is another apartment building. To the north of that is a home that is like a quadplex, I guess. It's set back from Martin Street, but it's got like 4 units there. So we have a lot of units in this short duration. This individual here just spoke and said that there were goals that had been met. I'm not quite sure what those goals are. I did also want to point out, and I'm kind of jumping around, I'm sorry, I didn't have prepared statements, but I had called the city to ask about this project, and I never got a call back from whoever I left a message with, so I was very disappointed about that. So I haven't been keeping up on this, other than I'm concerned that it's just another high density in an already very busy street. Martin Street didn't used to go through. As you know, we have Harvest Junction down there, and then now we have another development south of there. So this Martin Street between 3rd and 9th, which is supposed to be 25 miles per hour, and there is a blinking, flashing indicator at both ends, 3rd and 9th, never acknowledged. You know, people do not slow down. We already had a problem there anyway. Again, 60 years at this location, and now we keep adding more and more density and businesses to a street that's already not being properly regulated for the speed limit, which is one of our main concerns. I do see this being as a bottleneck, trying to get all those people out of such a tight area. So I would ask that all those considerations be reviewed or reviewed again if you've already looked at them. I don't know if the recommendation is to move forward at this point with this project, but again, I would like to break a little bit and have those relooked at because of our concerns. I don't know if my mother wants to come on here and speak, but I think I may have voiced most of her concerns as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sandoval. Anybody else who would like to come down and speak on this issue?
My name is Andy Ulmer. We own the property at 760 Martin, and we recently purchased it. Walking down behind Kensington, of course, the city owns. Then there's, sir, do you have the easy ability to show your PowerPoint again where you have the Google shot? The very first one. See this dirt access way that goes kind of north-south? Well, that's Kensington Park, of course, there. I'd say that's 20 feet wide or something like that. Eventually, as you continue that north towards 9th, there's one large undeveloped square right on 9th. Sooner or later, somebody's going to develop that. Contingent upon that, what would make good... Everybody can always hear me anyway, you know, so... contingent upon that, it seems to make sense to connect that. Since everybody's complaint seems to be traffic, why not alleviate some of the pain off of Martin? All of those homes are slated to at some point be multifamily, these kinds of things. Those homes don't sell. I mean, some of those, the house I just purchased was the first one for sale along there in that upper 10 units. That's the first house that sold in 10 years. Most of those folks have been there for 40 years, the neighbors immediately north and south. The nice lady we bought it from had horses there. She lived there for 45 years. She seemed to be kind of par for the course. But eventually, just due to pressures that are, those will all be turned into apartment buildings and such. It's the way it is. So why not long-term plan and get that to be a road at some point? I don't know where or when in the process somebody suggests that. I think I threw that out there at one point, and the idea was, well, hey, we're never touching this park, and I understand that it's a park. Nobody wants to mess with that. I'm not picturing a road. I'm picturing basically what it would amount to the same sort of road you'd have in a parking lot kind of situation. Something narrow where two cars can pass, and where you could actually get somebody from 9th down to the south there without going on Martin. So that all these multi-families aren't exiting on 24-foot wide little driveways onto Martin. Just an idea. You guys have a good night.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this? Okay, please come on down.
Good evening. I live at 729 Martin Street, and I've lived there 50 years plus, and I've seen the growth, and I've seen this traffic, congestion, noise, pollution, and I agree with what the other people had to say about their density. We have 2 apartment buildings right next to the new one that he plans on making. There's one right across the street, a fourplex. Around the corner, there's 3 apartment buildings, and we just have too much density, too much traffic, too much noise, pollution, congestion of people and traffic. That's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Ma'am, just for the record, could you give us your name, please?
What?
Your name, please?
Oh, Alvaro Sandoval,
Okay, thank you very much.
729 Martin Street.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate
Welcome.
it. Anybody else who would like to come down and speak on this? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing on this and we'll go back to discussion amongst the commission. Karen, I have a question for you. If you could speak to some of the issues we just heard raised about traffic. Was there a traffic study done? What are we looking at in terms of traffic?
Commissioner Shernick, sure. So I spoke to our traffic and transportation planner earlier today, just so I could answer this question in case it came up. So the city did not ask for a traffic study for this project, and that's because there's a threshold within the codes for whether or not a traffic study is required. And so we did not have a formal traffic study completed. Having said that, a multimodal plan was included as part of the submittal, and both transportation planning and traffic engineering did take a look at the multimodal plan and the parking and overall transportation issues, both from automobile, bicycle, and pedestrian access to the property. And as I mentioned, and no concerns were raised. That is typically a concern we get. Before this meeting this evening, I heard from another member of the public who I don't believe stayed around, who just raised some of the similar concerns, the overall concerns of just Martin being very fast and a whole lot going on that I am going to pass on to traffic engineering tomorrow. But in regard to this, both traffic engineering and transportation planning are okay with the additional traffic and parking that's being provided.
Okay. Also, there was a question that somebody in the public raised. Ms. Sandoval said there was mention about some goals having been met during your presentation. She wasn't sure what those were, and frankly, I don't recall your comment about that either.
I think what she was referring to is in my presentation, I mentioned that this application had met several goals and policies within Envision Longmont. And pulling open the staff report really quick. So as Planning Commission is aware, there are several goals and policies in Envision Longmont that deal with housing, sustainability, compatibility, infill development, making sure infrastructure is available, transportation, all of that. And so there's a complete list that I can go over if the commission would like, but just generally really quick. This project, it was identified that it directly met 9 of the goals and policies within Envision Longmont.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Flake.
Karen, I have another question. In terms of the outlot, which is part of the zoning, has it been determined how a fire department truck would access that land in the event of something happening, like an emergency with fire or with rescue?
Yes, Commissioner Flagg. So Emergency Services has reviewed both the plat and the site plan, and part of the outlot, there's a little turnaround right here, and you can see it better on one of the renderings, which is why I pulled it up. This green area here, that is actually being put in and is part of that outlot for emergency services, fire truck, ambulances, et cetera, turnaround areas so that they can access all of the buildings and make sure that they have all of the access that they need if there is an emergency.
So there is not needed a hydrant in their point of view.
No.
Thank you.
Commissioner Height.
Planner Bryant, I believe Mr. Lane identified that he thought that the inclusionary zoning issue had been met and that he was tier A. I think I recall from your presentation that it was being worked out. Do you have more to say on the inclusionary zoning issue? Is it worked out? Is it done? Or is there more that needs to be looked at?
We're waiting on final approval from the inclusionary housing department. Hold on one second. I'm going to pull out their email that outlines it. So it's been approved. Where I'm saying that staff is still working it out is it has conditional approval, but at time that the applicant pulls a certificate of occupancy for any structures, because it is within this middle tier A home price, they have to show what the sale price is to make sure it's still meeting the middle tier A home. And as long as it meets that, then we're still good. However, if once it's built and everything's done at time of CO, it doesn't meet that, then they will have to pay a fee in lieu. So conditional approval is I guess what I would refer to it as.
Commissioner Pullen.
Karen, as part of 1502.070.A.3, the additional review criteria for final plats, under A, the comment is the applicant is currently working with staff on finalizing, executing a public improvement agreement. Since that is not final, it's in the process, I mean, why wasn't that added as a condition?
Commissioner Pullen, the reason it wasn't added as a condition was because the Public Works Department, Public Works and Natural Resources, who typically work with our public improvement plans and public improvement agreement, are running that simultaneously with the site plan, not with the plat. And so that's why we didn't put a condition in here, but I did want to address it.
Any further comments, discussion, questions, motions? Commissioner Oneran.
Here it is. Since this application is in compliance with the zoning and Envision Longmont, and since the density proposed is a mid-range within the allowed range, and especially because the applicant already reduced the height and willing to preserve one of the existing structures, I move to approve this plat.
Can you give me a PZR and a letter with that?
PZR 2019-8.
And which version of the PZR, A, B, or C?
Okay, let me find that.
A is with no conditions, B is with conditions, C is denial.
No conditions.
No conditions. Okay, so PZR 2019-8A with no conditions has been moved to approve. Commissioner Poehler. Oops, hit your microphone. There we go. Okay, try again. There we go.
Okay, I do agree with Commissioner Oneran. I do find that this does meet the conditions as stated that had to be met for the preliminary and final plat. It also meets the zoning. It is mid-range. I do find that because of that, I can't really, I mean, understanding and hearing the concerns for traffic, but then having the fact that our traffic engineers have looked at it, they have not voiced their concerns for that. I do agree with Commissioner Oneran, and I will second this.
Okay, we have a motion that's been seconded to approve PZR 2019-8A. Is there any further discussion before we take a vote? Seeing none, let's take a vote. Chris? Okay, that passes unanimously, 7-0. I will now read. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the Commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period, which begins Thursday, June 20th at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, June 26th at 5 p.m. Karen, thank you very much for walking us through the project. Mr. Lane, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate that. We are going to move on with our agenda. Item 7 is a final call, public invited to be heard. This is to speak about anything that's not been on tonight's agenda. Anybody would like to come forward and speak? Yes, please come on down. Give your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Ken Glover, and I live at 416 Martin Street. And I am also an alternate member of this commission. And I decided it was better for me to speak after you guys had heard the item. I don't have a specific objection to this to the proposal you just heard, but at some point there's going to be a straw that breaks the camel's back along Martin Street, because as you've heard, there are traffic issues, speed. One of the things I see are quite a number of trucks. This is not a truck route, and you can see all the way from 3rd to 9th. They do go through, and that's been brought up to the city previously too. I don't know. I'm not sure that the infrastructure exists in this area to support this kind of development over and over and over again. Incrementally, doesn't hurt anything probably, but the cumulative effect, I think, can be an issue. I also see, as most of these along from this proposal from tonight to 9th Street, I see a lot of curb cuts. If you do the same thing all the way on that 2-block stretch, you're going to have a lot of turning motions onto Martin Street, and it could get really interesting. Somewhere in here there's going to be a time and a place where somebody needs to look at the whole thing at once, and I don't really think that's been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. Anybody else who would like to speak on anything that was not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no one, will close the public invited to be heard. Items from the commission. Commissioner Teta.
I think we should talk about the what has not come before us. This project that obviously brought a lot of people out. We don't get to vote about zoning. That's a council thing. But and I don't know if we're going to see this project come before us for sure. Could be an administratively decided thing, but I just wanted to open that up. I think somebody else probably has something to say about it.
Planning Manager Don Burchett, can I call upon you to respond to Commissioner Teta's concerns and to give us some clarity?
Certainly. Members of the commission. So we were approached earlier this year by a person who's looking to buy a portion of the church property that is over off of 15th Avenue. The property, when Envision Longmont was revised here a couple years ago, the property was originally shown as medium density residential on the original LACP plan. The Envision document changed it to the mixed neighborhood. And as you know, we increased our densities in all of our land uses when we did Envision. As an example, the low density residential, the R1 zones, as they went from 1 unit to 6 units to the acre. And now under the single family detached zoning district and the I can't remember the exact name, but low density residential land use in the Envision document, it went from 1 unit up to 8 units per acre. And those changes were reflected throughout the land use categories in the residential areas of the comprehensive plan. When and after Envision was adopted, and as we went through the updates to the land development code, the zoning was changed then to reflect those new land uses that were given by the Envision document when we adopted the new land development code. That property itself and some of the properties adjacent to it, even though they originally had a medium density land use designation on them, they were zoned R1. And you know, the vision for the comprehensive plan, Envision Longmont, is a guide to our future growth of the community. And while the zoning at that time did not reflect the land use that was on the original comp plan, when we made the changes, and we did this in other neighborhoods, we changed the zonings to reflect that, and that was one way to try to allow for that change to occur and to be able to achieve the densities and these changes in these areas without requiring somebody to go through a rezoning request as a part of their development applications. So the zoning has been changed, not in this area only, but in other areas around the city. There were maps, but I know that you guys saw a lot, so did council when this went through. But there was a number of areas that were identified where the zoning was changing, either giving people more or taking away some rights with the rezoning that was done citywide when we adopted the new land development code. Now, because that's happened and the church has this property that's excess to them, they've put it up for sale. A developer has been approached and come in and met with us and done what's called the pre-application meeting. That's their fact-finding due diligence process for trying to determine whether or not they want to move forward with a development application. So they've come in and they turned in some rough sketches, some concepts, if you will, of what they think they could do on that property underneath this new zoning. Part of their proposal is that they're looking and have talked about providing above and beyond the minimum amounts of affordable housing. I don't know what that is because it's not defined yet, but that's just some of the things that they had talked to our staff about at the pre-application meeting. Our pre-application meeting contains people from Public Works, Planning, Fire Department, Longmont Power Communication. We're looking at it from a number of aspects when we're doing those, but again, they're not detailed plans per se. Sometimes these are just bubble diagrams with general densities. So the level of review that happens is pretty limited. We're trying to identify the process they have to go through and what the rules are that they have to meet and answer questions for them. And so this project, as it was given to us at that pre-application meeting, would have required a subdivision plat to plat the property. That's a minor development application. That's staff level. They were proposing to do the public improvement plans that would be necessary then because they're going to have to build some public infrastructure. One of the things that was mentioned was a street that would go along the north side of this area to try to provide additional connectivity out of the neighborhood, hopefully trying to address some of the concerns with everybody having to use 15th Avenue to get out. And then the other application that would have to happen would be a site plan review. The proposed use is a permitted use in that zoning district, and therefore it doesn't require a public hearing. So the comparison and the question about the noticing, 300 feet is required if it stays at a staff level approval. If it meets the zoning code, you're not asking for variances, and you're meeting the rules that the council has set. The rules say that it's a staff level review. We notice 300 feet. Now, should we go out 300? We get into this often here. And I think that that's not just with the mailings that we do, but we also do the postings, and then we're also dependent on neighborhoods to talk to their neighbors and let them know what's going on and help them as well. Because at some point, even if we went out 1,000 feet, we're still gonna get people who are gonna say that wasn't far enough. And so for this application, when Brian reviewed it at the pre-app meeting, he set the distance at 300. Now, this application, because it's a staff level review currently, again, as we know it today, doesn't require a neighborhood meeting. So the applicants went out. Our guess is that they're probably trying to get CHAFA money, and so by getting money from the state, there are requirements for affordable housing that they have to do neighborhood meetings and notify the neighborhood and the public. And that's probably why they did the neighborhood meeting, but I don't know that for 100%. I'm making some assumptions. But they did do a neighborhood meeting, and oftentimes, as you've heard and seen, we sometimes get people who find out later in the process when it's a permitted use, because there wasn't a neighborhood meeting, where there's concerns that come up, and so we don't often get people who go out and volunteer to do these meetings. So I would say if there's a good part of all of this interest from the neighborhood is that it did what I think council and the planning commission wanted with notice and with encouraging these meetings, is that we've notified the neighbors early enough in the process that their concerns can be expressed, and we can hear them, and we can try to see if there's things we can do to address them during our review. We may not have rules to address them all, but you know what, we do have review criteria that we can be looking at to try to see if there's other things that we can put on a project to condition it to make it better. But again, we are limited within the rules that we're given as well at a staff level. So this application is really from our standpoint, in its infancy. It hasn't been turned in yet for us to process. They're still calling, occasionally asking questions. And the neighbors are doing what I think they need to do. If they have concerns with something that's in the comprehensive plan, in our zoning code, the way that the council and the planning commission can consider making changes to that or recommending changes is by hearing from people who are impacted. And luckily we're hearing about it early and not at the end. So I feel like the process is working the way it's supposed to, and we don't know whether or not this application will go forward. I mean, it's possible that it may not. And some of the concerns that are being expressed, as those are given back to the applicant, the person who's looking at doing this development, that obviously will probably weigh in on their decision whether or not they want to move forward with the project too.
So Don, let me just clarify that last point you made. If I understood you right, the neighborhood concerns that were mentioned tonight that are part of our public record now, you will make sure that that gets back to the developer?
So we notify them and let them know. So as an example, most of these folks actually spoke the other night at City Council.
Mm-hmm.
I think they mentioned talking about the SES system, the Sustainability Evaluation System, and I can talk about that if you'd like to know more about what that is. But we mentioned and told the applicant that, you know, there were people speaking. So our hope is that they're aware, and that then they can go and watch and hear what the concerns are, because again, that's part of why we tape these and we put these out available, is that not only do they come in handy trying to remember things way in the future, they're a good way to hear what happened at a meeting without necessarily having to attend.
Right. So I'll just chime in, since this is items from the commission. I'll chime in with some of my thoughts on this. I've seen it over and over and over again that developers who work with the neighborhood succeed far better and are more likely to succeed than those who ignore the neighbors. So, Mr. Developer, if you're out there in TV land, work with the neighbors, be neighborly. So, any other items from the commission? Commissioner Onaran.
Just to clarify, as it is, it's not going to come to this board. It's an administrative review.
Currently, as we have been presented, we do not see anything in the application that would require it to come to the Planning Commission. The exception that was mentioned by, I think, a couple of the neighbors is that if they do need any variances, then the project then would automatically require that those variances come to the Planning Commission, and then you would be reviewing the application.
Commissioner Poland.
Don, you mentioned, and there has been a request from some of the people in the audience here of making changes to the zoning code. They have asked us, it sounded like they may have asked the city council the other night. What is the process? I mean, because in my time here, nobody's proposed from the commission a change in zoning. It's always been presented to us. So what's the process? And to let the audience know too, if they need to do anything, what should they do if they want to try to request a change in zoning, or if one of the members of the commission here wants to request a change in zoning? What's the process?
Sure. Chapter 1502 spells out the processes for the city that we have to follow with the development code. The city council really has the ability to direct staff to bring back an amendment to the comprehensive plan that would, one, change the land use of that property or the property within that neighborhood, just like we did with the comprehensive plan. We would have to do some evaluation work based on the review criteria, and then we would have to bring that forward to the Planning Commission with our recommendation. You would review it, make a recommendation, and then the council would ultimately decide. If they did that, they could also direct us then, if it was approved, to bring back a rezoning where we would rezone those areas then to match the comprehensive plan. So there's a lot more detail than I'm providing, but in general, at this point, because it's going to affect someone else's property, not property that they own or that they could get everybody to agree to a change, it would really need to be the city council doing that under really a broader review of that neighborhood and that land use.
And Don, just to clarify, if I remember right, in our code there is a prohibition against what's called spot zoning. We can't just flip one little lot.
Right.
I mean, I know it's 4 acres, but in the scope of the city, it's relatively small. So, is there a possibility that some attempt to change the zoning to basically downzone it, that would be viewed as spot zoning?
It would depend on the scope of the proposal. As long as the area was adjacent to other properties in the area that have a similar zoning district that it's going to be rezoned to, as an example, to the south across the street, if those are zoned R1, or if you included all of the property that includes this parcel, the church that's adjacent to it to the west, and there's another, I think, single-family home that's a little pocket before you get into the neighborhood. If all of that was included in there so that you didn't leave, either A, you didn't create one lot with a unique zoning different from everyone else, or you didn't, by changing it, leave other areas that were also a standalone, I think you could meet the requirements of not spot zoning.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Height.
Thanks. Don, probably you can help me just clarify my understanding, and for the public as well too. I think that's what I was looking at. I was pulling up Envision Longmont. That was a 2016 amendment of the city's long-range planning. And as I understand that, in that long-range planning, we adopted new zoning. That new zoning changed, as you said, It upgraded some properties, it downgraded other properties. But there was notice, there were public hearings, there were city council hearings. City council adopted Envision Longmont with its new zoning program as an ordinance of the city of Longmont. The uses and the opportunities for developers to develop are pursuant to the zoning code, the zoning provided for in this 2016 document. I hear what the neighbors are saying, but it's, I don't want to say a fait accompli, but it's a fait accompli. It's already done. So that's my take on what has happened here.
And Commissioner Height is right in everything that it did, but what I would point out is that, you know, the city council does have the ability to direct staff to bring back other changes. So again, it would have to go through another public process. This is not something typically that is done quickly or overnight. I mean, nothing in government is, and, you know, to speak to the applicant tonight, they've been in the process over a year for a site plan and a preliminary plat. So this isn't something that would happen quickly, but if it's going to happen, it would take an action of council to direct staff to make that happen. And it is possible. I haven't seen something specific like this done probably since we did the area over by the Bond Farm neighborhood. We zoned that residential mixed density, I think it was called, back in the day, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, where we rezoned and looked at that and put on similar restrictions to what we had on the historic east side, where they were seeing a lot of people buying properties that were originally zoned multifamily R3, R2, and tearing down single family homes and building apartment complexes. The impact to the neighborhood, they were concerned they were losing their neighborhood, and the council had us go through, and we did just that. We developed a plan, we got it adopted, we rezoned the properties to match it, and had restrictions that helped to prevent that from happening. So there are examples of it, of how it's happened in the past, but it takes staff. I mean, that's the other hard part, at least from our standpoint as a department. It takes bodies to be able to process and work on those, and council would have to prioritize some of our other work that we're working on to make that happen quickly.
Commissioner Kohler.
How often do you get public resistance or concern about the 300-foot notification for administrative approvals? And then what would the process be to change that?
So that's a great question, Commissioner Kohler. I would say definitely less than half of our projects that we get people who are concerned with that. And if I was going to guess, maybe 2, 3 out of 10. That'd be my estimate of where we get concerns. The other side of that I'll point out, and this is the hard part about educating people about an application, is that sometimes when we educate people about projects that they don't get to actually show up at a planning commission meeting or at a city council meeting, and they find out about a project and it's a permitted use, and the way our regs are set up is that if it meets it, staff is required to approve it. It oftentimes causes more consternation because they feel, well, why'd you even let me know if I can't have any impact on the outcome of it? And I still would say that we want to know what your concerns are, because if there is a way that we can address those under the code, that's what we do. That's our job. So we want to know, but we've also had people who have gone the other way, which is, don't tell me about it if I can't have an impact. And so we've talked about this a number of times over the years that I've been here, 20 years now. And I don't know what the right distance is. I mean, that's a tough one. I did do a quick search to just see, and there were a few people tonight Not all of them said they didn't receive notice, but there were a couple that when I pull it up, it shows that they should have gotten notice. Doesn't mean that they did. I mean, I'm not going to say that they did or didn't. We have problems sometimes with the mail. I think we all know that. And sometimes the county's records may have it sending it to somewhere else that isn't necessarily to the address of where you're at and where you receive your mail. So, you know, we've tried a number of things with our postings and things that we do to let people know what's going on. But if the council and the planning commission, and especially planning commission, thinks that these notice distances should be increased, then I think that that's something that you could make as a recommendation to the council. Unfortunately, we don't have our council representative here tonight, but maybe that's something that's talked about at the next planning commission, is saying again that, you know, we've heard a number of times lately about these distances, and we really kind of feel, and maybe it is as a group, maybe it's just as a few of you, but maybe the recommendation is to the council that they consider increasing those distances, and then we could do that too.
I have a couple more things, some items I'd like to bring forward. First, y'all might have noticed that we did not have our city attorney present here tonight, Dan Kramer. He has taken a position as city attorney for the town of Estes Park, so I wanted to congratulate him on that. He told me he could not be here tonight because he's trekking in India in the Himalaya. So that sounds like maybe a little bit better than, I don't know. But Dan has been a stalwart member of our team, and I've really appreciated his guidance and his counsel, and he will be missed. So just wanted to publicly get that out there, that we wanted to thank Attorney Kramer. And then one more thing that I thought I would just mention to commissioners. I ran across a couple articles this past week that kind of opened my eyes. Just go and take a look, find information. The city of Minneapolis recently passed an ordinance to do away entirely with single-family housing zoning. So I'm just going to leave that there, let you ponder what that means, and go look it up. We don't have our council representative here. Any items from Planning Manager Don Burchett?
I have nothing else for you tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next item on our agenda is adjournment. Unless anybody is opposed, we are adjourned.